Uzengili, Turkey, 1997. More than 7,000 feet up, near the country's eastern border, an American explorer searching for Noah's Ark, named David Allen Deal, stumbles upon the ruins of an ancient settlement.
There is an extraordinary archaeological site in the Anatolian Plateau in Turkey called Naxuan. And Naxuan comes from an ancient word that means Noah's Zion, the city of God that Noah builds. Mount Ararat, which is the legendary resting place of Noah's Ark, is very close by. So it makes a lot of sense that this could have been the landing site of the Ark, and then this city would have been built by Noah.
The ancient Armenian historian, Moses of Corinth, called Naxuan the place of first descent, where Noah and his family emerged from the Ark and built the first city or town after the flood. Could this be the first settlement in the post-flood world, the place where Noah lived and died? Today, this remote area is largely uninhabited, but according to explorer David Deal, a recent archaeological dig reportedly uncovered something remarkable. The region may contain as many as 1 million graves.
There is evidence that people came from all over the world to bury their dead here for 10,000 years. The idea is that if you are brought here to be buried in the site of this extraordinary prophet, this man who was chosen by God to be the survivor of the deluge, that you too would be resurrected because you were in such holy company.
If the story of Noah is true, could this patch of earth be the final resting place of the father of all of humanity?
When the floods ended, God said, "Go forward, be fruitful, multiply, populate the earth." And then it says, God will create the descendants of Noah in God's image. We have the presence of the divine in our lineage, and it all goes back to Noah.
According to some researchers, if this is indeed the place where Noah began the repopulation of the earth, then the ark must be nearby as well.
In the book of Genesis, we read about how God commanded Noah to build an ark. And the measurements of this ark are quite large. The dimensions usually given are about 450 feet long by 75 feet wide by about 45 feet high. Such a boat of these dimensions was never seen in the ancient world. And in fact, not until the 19th century was there ever a boat of this size.
In 2009, a Dutchman named Johan Huybers started building a full-size version of Noah's Ark using the instructions laid out in the Bible. It took him 3 years and more than $1 million to complete the project. But while the ship seems perfectly designed to ride out a torrential storm, many say it's still far too small to literally hold 2 of every animal species on the planet.
It would seem pretty clear that Noah did not scoop up every form of life on Earth and put it in the ark. And so as a means of saving all life forms on Earth, this is not possible, not believable.
But ancient astronaut theorists suggest there might be another way in which the ark was able to preserve 2 of every creature on Earth, as stated in the Bible.
Let's look at it from a technological perspective. The only way that you can create an ark like Noah created according to what we can read in the Old Testament is if you collect DNA samples. So what if the ark was a metaphor or a symbol for some type of a DNA bank?
Did the ark described in the story of Noah really exist? And if so, might it have been not a vessel to carry 2 of every animal species, but a DNA bank built to hold the genetic information of all life on our planet.
What one might read into this is that some kind of special DNA bank was to be created, that animal DNA, plant DNA, and human DNA, for that matter, were all to be preserved somehow in an ark that was to float through the flood and this catastrophe.
September 2000, the Black Sea, Turkey. Marine archaeologist Robert Ballard and his team of underwater scientists discover what appears to be a farmhouse, some 330 feet below the surface. Estimates suggest the submerged dwelling to be approximately 7,500 years old. Ballard and other scholars speculated that rising ocean levels could have caused the Mediterranean Sea to burst through a natural dam, creating a flood so great it drowned an estimated 58,000 square miles under 500 feet of water. But more than finding the ruins of an ancient dwelling, had Ballard actually discovered proof that the biblical story of Noah and the Great Flood was true.
And those villages, of course, weren't built underwater. So Ballard concluded that the Black Sea, as we know it, was only created some 9,000 years ago. And that is exactly what we're talking about with Noah's Ark and the flood, the same area where all that happened. And in fact, mainstream archaeologists know that in the Mediterranean, there are over 200 known sunken cities. Those cities, too, were somehow flooded the same time that the Black Sea was flooded.
Also written in the book of Genesis, the story of Noah tells how God saw that the wickedness of man was great and decided to destroy all of creation. Only Noah, his family, and the animals aboard the ark were allowed to survive and repopulate the planet. But is this the whole story? Was Noah selected only for his virtue? Or was there another reason he was chosen to save the planet? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the Bible doesn't tell the whole story. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, a series of ancient texts, known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, were discovered in a cave located in what is now Israel's West Bank. Among the ancient writings are various stories not found in the traditional Hebrew Bible. One such story tells of Noah and his strange, miraculous birth.
One of the Dead Sea Scrolls is called the Lamech Scroll. What is Lamech? Lamech was a shepherd. And one day Lamech, his woman, was pregnant. And he said to her, "This is impossible. I was not here for months." But his woman, with the name Batenosh, swears, "No one touched me." But Lamech doesn't believe his wife Batenosh, and he goes to his father, which was Methuselah. And Methuselah says to Lamech, "I can't help you. I don't understand this. I believe your woman, Batenosh, that nobody touched her, and I believe you. So what should I do?" So Methuselah goes to his father, the grandfather now of Lamech. His name is Enoch. Now Enoch tells to Methuselah that the guardians of the sky have made an artificial insemination into the womb of Batenosh, the wife, and he should accept this child because this child would be the father of a new human generation. And in the Bible, this is Noah.
What if, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, the story of Lamech is true, and the guardians of the sky described in the story are in fact aliens? Does this mean that Noah was the product of an artificial insemination, a genetic experiment performed by extraterrestrials? If so, what was the reason for the Great Flood?
Well, the reason for the flood, and we need to understand this, it tells us is that Noah was pure in all of his generations. What does that mean? Why would the account, specify pure in all its generations?
According to the Bible, God sent the flood because of man's wickedness and corruption. But ancient astronaut theorists believe the flood was actually a means of ridding the earth of biological imperfections. By using Noah and his family, they could repopulate the planet with a genetically superior species.
Part of this human society is again genetically backward, closer to the animal. What can we do? These humans were spread out over the planet. So they said, we have to kill them all by a great flood. And then we have to restart again.
The Book of Genesis. In chapters 6 through 9, it is described that God had become deeply troubled by the wickedness of the human race and decided to bring it to an end by sending a great flood upon the earth. Only Noah and his family would survive, and it was God himself who gave Noah instructions for building the ark that would save both them and two of every earthly creature. The Book of Enoch tells the same story, but with significant differences.
One of the differences is that in the book of Enoch, the flood washes away these rebellious angels and washes away the Nephilim, as opposed to the traditional flood story, which washes away people who have been rebellious and sinful. God is protecting us in the book of Enoch. It is a very different God than the spiteful, wrathful God that we see in the Genesis account.
Another key difference in Enoch's account is that Noah is not given instructions to build the ark by God, but by the angel Uriel.
The archangel Uriel is the one who warned Noah about the impending flood and who told him about humanity's future and the possibility of this cataclysm. What we're witnessing here is an extraordinary story of an extraterrestrial being having a tremendous, in fact, incalculable influence on human affairs.
Does Enoch's account of the Great Flood reveal that it is not a story of God punishing humankind, but of extraterrestrials directing the course of humanity? As far as many religious scholars are concerned, both the biblical version and the Enochian version of the Great Flood are simply allegorical tales. But an increasing number of archaeologists and historians now believe that this global cataclysm actually happened. Uzengeli, Turkey, 1997. After years of research, American explorer David Allen Diehl has become convinced that the biblical story of Noah is, in fact, historical and is on the hunt to find the remnants of the ark. At an elevation of more than 7,000 feet near Mount Ararat, where the Bible says Noah's ark eventually landed, he stumbles upon the ruins of an ancient settlement.
What he discovered is what's known as the lost city of Noah or Nashua. And this is an area that's near a strange geological formation that some people think is actually Noah's Ark. Because Noah's tomb is said to be here, a huge cemetery has grown up around this lost city of Noah. And people from all over the Middle East in ancient times insisted on being buried in this area.
Tales of a great flood destroying the world can be found in the earliest myths of many ancient cultures across the globe. Both the Hebrew Bible and the Islamic Quran describe an epic flood in the tale of Noah's Ark.
God was unhappy with the people for their sinful ways, and as a kind of punishment and also an act of purification, sent the great deluge. Most living things would die in this except for a few birds and fish. But he told Noah very specifically how to build a craft that could survive the storm.
Noah is to collect pairs of the air-breathing animals on Earth, and he packs these animals and his family into the ark. and then it rains for 40 days and 40 nights and floods the entire earth. And all air-breathing animals and people are killed.
In ancient Mesopotamia, a similar story of a catastrophic flood was chiseled into clay tablets dating to 2000 BC. Known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, this early Sumerian poem describes angry gods that send a great flood to destroy mankind, while allowing only a chosen few to survive.
The gods had created humanity to perform whatever labor they were supposed to do, but what happened was that, according to the old Mesopotamian stories, human beings just started causing too much trouble. They became noisy, they became rebellious, and it was just time to wipe them out. And that's actually what's reported in those old creation stories.
But did such stories of great floods engulfing the world merely spring from man's imagination? Or were they real? If so, might such devastation have had an otherworldly origin, as ancient astronaut theorists believe?
If the human race in the early 21st century is now weaponizing the weather, why shouldn't aliens from some faraway world have already developed it? If ancient aliens were able to weaponize the weather, then I don't think we can rule out the idea that possibly some of these great ancient floods may not have been the work of gods, but could have been the work of highly advanced technological aliens actually seeking to potentially obliterate the human race.
There are more than 1,000 different flood myths from cultures all around the world. And the tendency has been for archaeologists to say that that's simply because people's fantasies work in the same way. But I honestly think there's a much simpler explanation for why the flood myth is so universal. I think it's a memory of what happened at the end of the Ice Age. What's much more mysterious is that, coupled with these memories of global devastation, there are also memories of almost godlike beings with incredible powers and abilities who were caught up in that cataclysm.
The deluge stories are really very interesting. What they all say is that the angels, the gods, whatever we want to call them today, they basically just got tired of humanity, where there's a wanton intention to wipe out or thin out the human race.
Right there, we have a perfect example that maybe the extraterrestrials were unhappy with Homo sapiens, and it is possible that they then created some type of a catastrophe, some flood, to eliminate mankind. But it's also possible that benevolent extraterrestrials warned us about an impending catastrophe so that not everyone would be destroyed